Hi, thanks for tuning in to TV2 today for Front Porch Conversations. We're here today on the porch at the Copeland Community Center, and my guest this morning is Bill McNair. Bill, thank you for being here.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
And Bill, you're fairly new to the village, but particularly new to Taylor Commons.
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
You want to tell us a little bit about how you got to the village?
How I got to the village. All right. Well, it was basically because of a situation that occurred in my wife's life, starting with the fact that she went to the hospital with some breathing problems, and as a result, she ended up passing away. And so as a result of that, my whole world caved in. I ended up in the hospital myself after a lockdown when they thought that I was psychotic and was going to actually having to go to the nutty center. I ended up, they saying, he's just grieving. And so as a result of that, I got put into the hospital to recuperate, and therefore I was spent 2 weeks in the hospital at North Florida Regional, and then I ended up after that back at home. But my son knew that I was going to need therapy because I had re-injured my shoulder in that lockdown, and I also had injured my left shoulder in the lockdown, along with my legs and my ankles. And so as a result, I was going to be going into therapy following the hospitalization. And the therapy was going to be done, hopefully, at Advent Christian Village, because that was an ideal place that both my wife and I had talked about going to Advent Christian Village in retirement, but she didn't make it. But we knew of it. I already knew about Advent Christian Village because I had tuned a number of pianos in Advent Christian Village during the years that I was serving as a piano tuner for the whole town of Live Oak, as well as Suwannee County, Hamilton County, Columbia County, Lafayette County, and even up in Alachua County. A bunch of the churches used me along with the others. So anyway, that was a part of my ministry. And so I ended up in Advent Christian Village in quarantine. Needless to say, that was, well, I want to use a word that I should not use, so therefore it was hellish. Let's put it that way. And it was terrible. But after 14 days of quarantine, I spent another 2.5 to 3 weeks in Magnolia once I got cleared to get out of quarantine. Lost 20 pounds in quarantine, and then ended up gaining 20 pounds back in Magnolia. And after a month and a half of Magnolia, moved over to Dossier Manor, and spent another month and a half to 2 months in Dossier Manor. Made friends and girlfriends with all of the ladies and the gentlemen in Dossier Manor, ministering to them in a certain in an unusual way as I prayer walked throughout the little village, throughout the Dossier Manor. Spent about maybe 3 or 4 miles in Dossier, inside Dossier, going back and forth to the halls, and then ended up going from there to the independent living, and that was my goal, was to get to independent living, and got into Taylor Commons, and I've been there in Taylor Commons since maybe 2 months, and gradually getting most of the stuff from my house in Live Oak to the Taylor Commons in McGranahan Center. I think part of the McGranahan Center, and loving it, and learning to adjust to living alone.
Right.
And that is a difficult thing, especially when your wife did all of the cooking and did all of the housekeeping and all of the cleaning, and all I did was enjoy it, as well as work at what I was doing, and we worked good as a team, but she did all of the cooking, and I ate beautifully as a result of it. So I'm having to learn how to cook for myself and clean and fix my own bed and take care of myself.
Well, I think this was an interesting story to show how you've accomplished a goal already, and that's getting your independence back.
You ma'am. Thank you.
I want to start another place. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. Lived, in fact, most of my adult life in Shreveport, until graduating from college and then going on to seminary. So my recollection of Shreveport was basically my father was a mechanic, and he bought a wrecking yard, and he of course he named it McNair Auto Service. And so I learned even as a teenager. I grew up and my recollection somewhat of grammar school was at Cresswell Elementary, where I met a gentleman that had a business that was just south of there. He was a Presbyterian minister, N.A. Warchuck, and he had started a program calling Bible Memory Association. And that Bible Memory Association required you to memorize 5 books. Each of these books had 250 verses, and all the rest of them were 200 verses, of which you memorized the 250 verses over a course of a number of weeks. You would get various little presents for memorizing once a week each of things and each of the verses. And as a result of that, I came to know Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. And that was a very significant thing for me, because my mother was the one that actually led me to that point. And so I definitely remember that event in my elementary age I think at the age of 8 or 9 years of age, coming to know Jesus as my Savior. And as a result of that, over the course of 5 years, I was able to memorize all of those 5 books, which meant 250 verses one year, 200 verses the next 4 years. So that was a lot of scripture memory that had become a part of myself during that period of time. It made a point of actually, during the course of my years in high school, I actually had the opportunity to lead in the singing of the church that I belonged to, First Baptist Church. Ken Dooley was the minister of music there, and he taught me not only how to sing, but also how to direct music, and it made an interest in music, which caused me to eventually be a minister of music as the Lord led me into that type of field. I went on from there to actually, and one incident in that, if that's okay
Sure.
to share that, one incident in that was when I went to a buddy of mine. I think it was 3 of us, but I remember especially the 2 friends, Billy Mason and Billy McNair. The 2 of us went to New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey, to the Westminster Choir College for 3 weeks. And we rode in a train all the way up without chaperones here, us teenagers, just the 3 of us going all the way up there. And Billy and I had the opportunity in the middle of that event to actually have a, quote, vacation, a little weekend hiatus. And we took we took a train all the way into New York City. And 2 teenagers in 1954, 2 teenagers were able to sleep on a boardwalk on Coney Island, and see Coney Island, see the boardwalk, go back all the way into and see the sunrise in New York City, and hobnob around all of New York City, getting acquainted with all of the sights and sounds of New York City by ourselves. And we managed to do it and survive.
And if I were your mother, I'd have been a nervous wreck.
I'm sure we didn't tell her until we got home after 3 weeks. So
after high school, you went to Baylor University?
We went to Baylor University, and there I got a degree in music and in Spanish. I basically majored in religion because I thought I was going to be a missionary, and I thought I was going to be a missionary to South America. So therefore, I minored in Spanish and minored in religion, and or majored in religion and minored in Spanish and minored in music. And so that gave me my background for both going on mission fields later, when I did go on mission fields to Venezuela and to Cuba and to other Argentina, South America, and to Guatemala and Roatan. All of those were later events that I spent on the mission field for a week, but served basically as a minister of music after graduation from seminary. I went from Baylor University to Southwestern Seminary. By the time I got to graduated from Baylor University, I had already met my future wife. I had already met my Frances in high school, and she and I dated all through high school, or at least through my senior year and her junior year, and then on into college, because she followed me to Baylor. And so both of us had an opportunity to get better acquainted in Baylor. And my future father-in-law said, if you marry her before she graduates, you pay for it. So therefore, I waited until after she graduated in 1961, and we then got married while I was in seminary. I had already started seminary in 1960 after graduation from Baylor. I went to Southwestern Seminary, and then she joined me, and we set up housekeeping at Southwestern Seminary for my eventually 4 years. It took 4 years to get a 3 years degree, to get a master. Well, it was a bachelor's of music's degree. I got a bachelor's of arts degree in Baylor, and then I got a bachelor of music's degree in seminary instead of master's, because at that time bachelor was the only way that I could go, since I did not have a bachelor's of music's degree. So I ended up spending 4 years in seminary from 1960 to 1964. And my wife and I ended up, after the first year of being in seminary, having our first child. So on my first anniversary, we had Beth, and she blessed our family. We ended up with a full house of furniture with my marriage to Frances. And so we graduated. I graduated, and she joined me as we went into our first church that was in Fort Smith, Arkansas, serving Emmanuel Baptist Church in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and there was where our second child was born, in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And we served there 2.5 years. In fact, ministers of music those days tended to be 2.5 years of service, and then we would move on. Mm-hmm. I did go to the next church that I served was in Clinton, Tennessee, and that had an interesting experience in which we were there in the let me back up. Okay. While I was in seminary, I served part-time working for a bank, and in 1963, if you'll recall, that was a very significant year, right, in 1963 for our nation. I was working at that bank as a night proof operator for the bank. And the next morning, I stayed long enough because John F. Kennedy was going to speak in Fort Worth at a park just right across from his hotel that he stayed in. And I had an opportunity, along with a bunch of other people, to hear the last message, or the last speech that he gave before he went to Dallas for ultimately his assassination. And so that was quite significant that I was there for that event. And then after we graduated, we went to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and then to Clinton, Tennessee. And that significant event, I spent 4.5 years there as a minister of music and youth, and at First Baptist Church. And we had an opportunity to actually see the evidence of the the
The civil rights
yeah,
movement.
the civil rights things where it was the desegregation, and there was Walter Cronkite spoke during that period of time, and they actually had the federal marshals that were watching it, and we had an opportunity to be involved in that. Okay, so we actually had that was one of the significant things in which we actually saw or was involved in that thing. Now, I think it was that event, and we ended up, as a result of my ministry at First Baptist Church in Clinton, we actually had the opportunity to lead a black gentleman, a young man, that was a part of our ministry, and we were one of the second ones that started that sang "Good News," which was one of the first ones of the musicals that came up, and then "Tell It Like It Is," and he became a member of First Baptist Church of Clinton, Tennessee, which was after the Reconstruction. He was one of the first ones that actually was a black in a lily white First Baptist Church. So that was quite an experience to be a part of that part of our life. And then after that, we moved to Mobile, Alabama, where I served as a minister of music in 8 Mile, not in 8 Mile, but in Pritchard, Alabama, which was basically a black community that was a lily white church in a black community, and I ended up having that kind of experience of spending 2.5 years in Pritchard serving as a minister of music and seeing the transition of a town moving from white to black, and living in that environment. Then from there went to Miami, Florida, and served as a minister of music at Flagami Baptist Church. Flagami Baptist Church was a church that was in transition as well. The Lord used us there because we spent 9 years at Flagami Baptist Church, and it then eventually became Tamiami Baptist Church because Flagler Street and Flagami merged as a result of the decline both in Tamiami and in Flagami and in Flagler Street. It then became Tamiami Baptist Church, and I became the first minister of music of Tamiami Baptist Church, and the pastor of Flagler Street became the first pastor of Tamiami Baptist Church. And for those 9 years, we served as not only the minister of music, but we also did youth in ministry, and ended up with a puppet ministry that encompassed 50 puppets. We actually had 50 puppets that we used in a puppet ministry with our teenagers, and they served as a catalyst for puppet ministries throughout Florida, and even somewhat into Georgia and other places where we actually did puppet ministry leadership places. And actually, after working with puppet productions, we had an opportunity to use those puppets to actually train other churches to do puppet ministry. And that was an exciting experience, a part of being able to give out to other churches an opportunity to meet needs and to reach children for Christ through the puppet ministry.
And I know a lot of children were reached in probably ways that they wouldn't have been without
Yes.
that. That was an introduction that...
In fact, my children, both Beth, Randall, and Jason, all three of my children, had also learned under my leadership in Miami, learned to do puppets, and so they themselves actually went in their churches. They started puppet ministries themselves, and even today, right now, my son Jason, who has now served as a catalyst for Utah, Idaho Baptist Convention, he actually uses his puppet to work up there even now as a pastor, or not a pastor, but as a graduate of a seminary, and as a associate pastor. Really, it's sort of like a leadership. He works with music and with education and pastors. He works as a pastor leader team. In other words, he's with the convention. But he followed me as far as being in ministry, working in youth ministry and in education ministries. So that was a beautiful part of my ministry.
Bill, you've had such an exciting and diverse life, but I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about your mission trip experiences.
Yes, went to had opportunity while in Miami. Had an opportunity to go 4 times to Brazil. Went on a mission trip to Brazil with church members from our association in our area, and went down the Amazon, worked the Amazon on 4 different occasions, and we also had an opportunity to go to Roatan and served on 2 occasions the people of Roatan, helping the children, the Spanish children of Roatan in the La Colonia, to actually get a spiritual education, as well as living water for Roatan was the reason that we got there. The gentleman that went there to start that ministry wanted to provide water for Roatan, and so as a result of doing living water for Roatan, he actually provided physical water, and he also provided spiritual water for them during those 2 seasons that we went to Roatan. Then we went to Guatemala for the ministry there with the One More Child, where we went to the Florida Baptist Children's Home that has a ministry to Guatemala, where we actually worked with a mission, a ministry through a children's home, through an
orphanage,
orphans home there in Guatemala, where a lot of the children they weren't orphans, but their parents could not take care of them. So the One More Child actually was serving as an orphanage home for these children, and we did ministry there, building houses for the parents so that the parents could have a place to live, and we served in that capacity, and we had an opportunity to talk to all of the children who lived in that orphanage home, and it was an exciting experience of having ministry there. And then, of course, we actually did mission work through disaster relief also while we were there in the Miami area. In fact, it was not in Miami so much as it also was in Live Oak, where we actually went with disaster relief and had an opportunity to go all over and build churches throughout the South. There was a number of churches. In fact, 4 or 5 years we went to do disaster relief, and that was exciting.
Bill, when did you actually move to Live Oak, you and your wife?
In 1984, we went to Live Oak. My first church, the first time I was at church in life. In fact, let me share another incident. The person that actually got me to Live Oak was Arthur Lawrence, who is a resident here in Advent Christian Village now. Know him personally, and known him for now 35 years. And also Ken Woods, who is a member at Advent Christian Village, lives just outside around Butterfield Acres. He was one of the ones that I actually tuned his piano 35 years ago when he and his wife Mary were members there. And of course, after she passed away, he moved to Advent Christian Village. He and his son Kenny, and we thoroughly enjoy an opportunity to reacquaint with him and actually eat lunch in the Rump Dining Hall with Ken and Kenny. Most of the days when we go there, we see him because and that's a good experience.
You know, it's interesting how our lives keep intertwining with others we've met along the way.
Oh, yes.
Now tell us quickly, because we're running out of time, how you got to be in the piano tuning.
Well, as in 1972, I was a minister of music at White Oak Baptist Church in Houston, Texas, and I learned to tune pianos because there were so many pianos that needed to be tuned at that church. And I said, well, I knew how to I had to put a good ear, so I knew how to tune pianos, and so therefore I got a mail order catalog from someplace where it says, learn how to tune pianos, and if once you have tuned pianos for 50 pianos, we'll give you a certification saying that you're a piano. And they gave me the basic tools for learning how to tune pianos, and so I learned how to tune a piano. And then later, of course, I actually served as a piano tuner, because after losing the position at First Baptist Church, I ended up going into business with the Department of Children and Families, and I used as a side income, I used piano tuning. And then once I finally got tired of church politics and government politics, because I did not like having to answer to someone higher up and then try to fuss at people down below me to get them to do something that they didn't want to do and that I really did not like making them do.
Bill, we're going to have to wind our time up, but I want to just take a quick note to tell people that Bill still has a big bucket list, and there's at least 8 pianos that he has right now that he will be tuning, and I know that there'll be other adventures.
Not only that, but I work for food. I will still tune pianos, but it will be strictly for food because I'm out of the business.
Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And thank you, Bill, for being with us.